So I feel you 100% on that. So are there kind of role models you had? I know a lot of you talked about instinctively how you like to train coming into it, and then you had your personal experience, your quick early success. Were there guys that you kind of modeled those principles off of, that you kind of that stood out as far as having the sweet stuff to offer, or were things kind of patchwork as you went on?
Well, just learning, I had mentors. A guy named Skip Sylvester when I was 16 and started training. A couple other people helped me along the way. Then I hooked up with my training partners in the early 2000s, Adam Driggers, Don Del Blue, people that were top lifters at the time. And people that I looked up to, the first powerlifting book I read was Ed Cohn's The Man, the Myth, the Method.
Okay.
And I saw he does a very simple linear periodization, progressive overload, and his assistance work is basically bodybuilding stuff.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Then over rows, shrugs, bicep curls, press downs, push grip, overhead press, and then, some squats and deadlifts. That's what he did. And it's just easy, it's consistent, and the simple, the better. And that's why, so to answer your question, Ed Cohn, Steve Goggins, those guys were huge inspirations for me. I remember you're talking about the late 90s in magazines. We had Muscle Fitness, we had Flex, we had Muscular Development.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember one time Ed Cohn was on the cover of MD or Flex, and I was like, 903 deadlift. What the hell? I was flipping through, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy deadlifts 900? And so that got me interested. So I bought his book, The Man, the Myth, the Method, and I just read about his life. I read about him. The first meet that he did was at the YMCA at 165, and he lost, and then he never lost another meet again.
I was scouring through. I was about to cut together kind of a Cohen compilation video because he's somebody I cite heavily. One, because he's regarded as one of, if not the greatest powerlifters of all time for a whole host of reasons. And on top of that,
I think the biggest. I'm sorry.
Oh no, and I was just gonna say on top of that, because his approach is so counter to so much of what, like you said, his assistance is bodybuilding. Like if you go through a lot of the best guys, it's a hyper fixation on all of these different things with their heavy lifts. So they have that suit of armor he talked about. And I can't get my clients to bodybuild to save their life. I'll have somebody who will die under an 8-second deadlift max attempt. But if I tell them to get on the leg press, they're trying to put 25-pound plates on. Or, it's like a whole different mindset when it comes to what it is to build up your body. But one of my favorite clips I came across of his, he looked like a kid. It had to be like 1980, late 1980s probably. And they're interviewing him to his local news station. And they're like, so how did you get this expertise? How'd you learn how to do all this stuff? Because this is before, the internet wasn't even a thing back then. Talk about Reddit and YouTube and Google not being a thing. The internet barely existed or didn't exist back then. And his response was so deadpan. He was like, I read the magazines. He's like, that's it. I read the magazines. It's like, I didn't get some worthless cert. I didn't go train under some guru. I didn't do this super elaborate, convoluted method that got preached to me by so-and-so. And it's implied in there, I didn't get stuck on some dogma. I found what people were doing that worked, that got recommended for decades and decades, and I applied it. And then the big thing he says that I love is like, make it work. It doesn't matter what program you run. There's a learning curve for everything. Make it work. And that's what nobody does. They expect whatever program they do to have some magic sauce to it. And 2-3 weeks in, when it doesn't produce, they're on to the next one. And they never got a chance to mold it to themselves and actually figure out what has to go in. And it's that ADD, which again, the age of the internet doesn't help with, that really kills people, I think, is that they can't focus long enough to get on there, to make something happen with whatever they do.
Ed Cohn tells a story. We were on a panel up at Swiss in 2018. It was me, Kaz, Matt Winning, JL Holdsworth, Jim Wendler, Ken Wedham, and who else? There's a few of us. I might be missing somebody, but JL, Winning, Kaz, Cohn. Yeah, so we're all up there.
You have any Kaz stories?
And yeah,
I hear there's some stories about Kaz. Sorry, go ahead.
So sorry about that. So so basically, Ed was saying that he wanted to be Arnold. He wanted to be Arnold. Ed was saying he wanted to be Arnold. Well, then he met Arnold, and he only came up to his chest. And said, "Oh, that's not going to work." So then he saw Kaz on Wide World of Sports and said, "That's who I want to be." So that's where Ed got his inspiration, is from Kaz.
Okay.
And he watched him on World's Strongest Man. He watched him lifting, and he said that's who my inspiration is. So that's cool. Interesting. Yeah, Kaz he's a very interesting guy because he's got a big sense of humor. But you don't see it coming a lot of the time at all. And he's definitely a character, a good guy, a character, and he's very funny, and that caught me off guard.
Is that right?
A lot of funny stuff. Yeah. You want me to tell a story that he did on the panel?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So we were up on the panel. It was winding down for the day. We got a room full of people. We got the people up there that I was naming earlier. And so Jim Wendler starts talking about working with the high school that he's working with now. And he goes on and starts talking about, just kind of telling everyone how he's so charitable and stuff. And, we're just like, okay, yeah, whatever. And so he's talking, and then Kaz grabs the microphone from the end and gets passed to him. He goes, "Well, I got something I'd like to share." He goes, I've always been charitable. I like to do this. In 1979, I went to 30 high schools in 18 days. And then he goes, I went to the YMCA, I went to churches, I went to high schools. And, and by the time I left, I went to this one particular high school, and I just gave it my all. I spent the last 4 days in Washington, D.C., or in Washington State, teaching kids and inspiring them with words and teaching them how to shoot steroids and take Anadrol and do it. And everyone in the crowd is singing, Anadrol, Anadrol, Anadrol. And yes, I give back, I help, I do what I can. And he said it all with a straight face. It was freaking awesome.
That's hilarious.
I went to 10 schools in one day. Oh, shit. Then I was invited to the community for a day and a half. 30 hours I went to 15 schools and YMCAs. I went to another community and they said, Bill, can you stay for a little longer? I said, I got a day and a half. In 32 hours we went to 18 schools and Ys. I went to Seattle, Washington, and delivered a message of hope and inspiration to try to motivate young people on how to load their syringes to take steroids and whether to use Anadrol and that kind of thing. 27 schools in 3 days. So I keep it real. Try to get it back. When the kids are in the bleachers going, steroids, steroids. I go, no, it's hemorrhoids. And they go, what? But that was microphones under my shirt.
At first, I didn't know what he was saying at first. I'm like, is he really saying that he went and told high school kids how to take steroids and eat Anadrol? But yes, so everyone was dying laughing.
That's funny.
And you see us on the panel go like this. What? Yeah, because that stuff's taboo. It's a little less taboo in Canada, right?
That's where
we were.
That's where was Canada?
Yeah, well, so things are a little looser up there.
And there's it's still even taboo here. It's funny because it's reaching this level where there's so much discussion and awareness, but at the same time there's really not. So you still get these people that have this their stomach gets up in their throat anytime it gets brought up. And I heard Kaz speak. I was probably 19. He was at the LA Fit Expo. And it was before Strongman got popular, over the last 5-10 years like it did. And there was a hall with, probably 12 people in it. And I was in there listening to him talk for an hour. And I can only imagine if that audience heard that, people would start clutching their pearls. They'd be like, no, Kaz, not you. You were one of the good ones. So it's funny what the average fan base is like now.
But the good part is he was mocking Jim Wendler too, because Jim was talking about how he gave back to high school, and he goes, "Well, I got a story." And then as he's telling the story, I went to 18 schools, went to 36 schools, and then Jim's like, "Damn!" Like Jim still has his microphone. Damn, he's listening to tell the story. He's totally trolling Jim. It was hilarious.
It's like, well, I went to 5,000 schools last year. That's funny.
And Jim was eating it up. He's like, "Damn, really?"
It's like, wow, that's
really. And then he drops the bomb on him.
Yeah, I had a good opportunity. I'm a state chair at the moment for United States Strongman. It's ran by Willie Wessels. So the last time I ran a show at the LA Fair, and I was lucky enough. I got some drinks in Willie, and he loosened up with some stories of the heyday of being around, and he was kind of a contemporary Kaz and Coan back in the day. So it's funny to hear things from the other side, right? Because you end up with this glossy image of your heroes, and then when people are like, well, this is what it was really like behind the scenes, you're like, no. It was pretty interesting to get that perspective.
Well, it's like the Last Dance, where I actually thought that Michael Jordan would have been a lot more of a dick than he was. I mean, he was just a winner. That's what you do. But a lot of the times, the behind the scenes stuff is not pretty with people, and they're excelling to be the best in the world. They trample on people. They misuse people at times. They abuse people just to get to the top. A lot of the time, it's because of supplements and other drugs that are mixed in there. So it's not always a beautiful trail they leave behind them when they're making it to the top. And it's apparent now. Look at Conor McGregor right now. He's a disaster. He's a disaster.
Yeah, I don't follow fighting that much, but I did catch this last fight, and I saw the leg break, and then you see the kind of run. And that's normal for the UFC. They have their little golden child that they parade out. They're the one bringing in all the money. And good for Conor. He got the most of his money when he was still at the top. It doesn't really matter what he does now. But when you're trying to maintain that kind of fake presence as being the greatest of all time before the greatest of all time has been established, that it's harder to be king of the mountain than to get there. It's almost like the journey there is less daunting than trying to hold your ground and not have somebody knock you off. But that's a rough spot to be in, is to try to cling to it before it fades away.